One, two. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could invite you to take a seat, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to pride myself on the fact that as an educator you've got your eyes on everybody in the room, but it's a little bit challenging when you're in a space such as this. Before we begin, can I just ask to make sure that people do have a copy of the formation framework itself? And there's just a very brief overview of the flow of the launch, just on a single sheet of paper. We do have spare copies of that if you would like. So as we gather around our spiral, it's my great pleasure to have the opportunity to welcome you all to this sacred place. And as the framework suggests, this framework is for Edmund Rice communities throughout Oceania. And I think it's fitting that we gather indeed as an Edmund Rice community, no matter whether we are educators, whether we're involved in ministry, in camps with young people. There is a common element of our connection to the spirit that inspired Edmund, which was a response to being inspired by the life of Jesus. So as we begin our reflection and launch, can I just invite you to take this opportunity to be as present as you can be to where we are gathered. And I'll just lead you in a few words of what I think are wise words to anchor us into being present. Be here. Dwell in this present place. In this place that holds us with all of our collective stories. For all that you carry and all that you have carried. For all that you love and all that have and will love you. For the future that awaits. For the grace that walks with you. Here, the place that we are now. The place between before and after. The place that holds you and your yesterdays, all memory and experience, light and shadow. The place that holds your longings into the beyond. Be still and know. Be still. Be. As we gather, we may recall those of us who we call colleagues in the work that we do. We acknowledge them, even though they may not be physically with us. And all those people that we endeavour to serve, we hold them as we launch our framework. So as we gather around the call contained within our new formation framework, we recognise that it wraps itself around Edmund Rice communities in Oceania. And we reverence our sacred story that is at the heart of our new framework. It states in this framework that at the heart of our sacred story is the mystery of the divine, whom we name God, breathing life into and evoking wholeness within all creation. By entering into and immersing ourselves in our sacred story, we encounter this mystery. This morning when our identity leaders gathered, in breaking open our reflection at the beginning of the day, we introduced the notion of the gathering of voices. So I'm going to invite representatives of the province, the Oceania province, to lead us in the gathering of voices. And as those voices are being declared, a message stick will travel the distance between each. So just allow yourself to be present to the different threads of the sacred story that we acknowledge that's at the heart of our framework as we listen to these voices that we're gathering. So if I could invite our leaders of this session to take their place, please. So as we begin our celebration, let's pause to bring into our awareness each thread that makes up our sacred story.
We invite the mystery of the divine, who we name God, and its all-embracing presence. Presence that voices, I am that I am.
We are enlivened by the life of Jesus, the incarnation of God's love, a love that lived out his proclamation, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full.
We are inspired and guided by the response of Edmund. May we too live deeply in the same spirit of providence that is echoed in his assurance, the will of God be done in this and in everything we undertake.
We recall the resolve and willingness of Ambrose Tracy, who prior to embarking upon his significant adventure declared, "When informed some time ago that I was spoken of as likely to be sent, though I did not attach much importance to it, my sentiments were that I would not make the selection of it. But if sent, I would endeavour to act my part faithfully, whatever it might be."
For the voice of the young people that we hold tenderly in our care, may they glimpse the image of God, the presence of Jesus, and the daring of Edmund through their relationship with us and each other.
For the voice of all people who come to offer themselves in service to Edmund Rice communities throughout Oceania. May we be people of inclusion, seeking enrichment from the diversity of faiths and worldviews that are a part of the rich fabric of our human family.
For our nation, may all who live in this land find their voice to dare a place that is open-hearted and full of courage.
for our world. May our one planet and the beauty it voices in abundance lead the human family towards an ever-growing conversion of heart.
So we gather all of these voices in symphony in the land of the Wurundjeri people and place. We pray that the deep spirit and wisdom of this place and its people may come to hold us as we come together to shape meaning for our way. Within the formation framework, and you can see, those of you who can see the visual there, there's movement which we call a dynamic of formation, of which there are three aspects. We recognise that when we are in relationship, engaging with, giving life to, encountering our sacred story, that in doing so, we've discerned that we can be moved by the Spirit, breathing life into all that we do. There's a sense of being alive in relationship. And there's a daring to be called to liberation. We've invited 3 people from different parts of the Edmund Rice communities across Oceania to reflect on one of those dynamics from a personal perspective. So I'd like to invite Dr. William Saltman, the Director of Province Mission within the province of Oceania, to come forward and share his reflections on the dynamic of being moved by the Spirit.
Thank you, Luke. Good afternoon to each and everyone here. I come as just one of the voices who might share perspectives. Firstly, thank you to organisers for this privilege of just sharing a thought or two. And in doing that, could I acknowledge our elders, past and present, Indigenous and others, and particularly could I acknowledge Brother Peter and his team, and Brother Paul and members of EREA Council and Board. It's with great pleasure, I think, that we congratulate the writers and the collaborators, the editors, a whole group of different people who have contributed to the reflections. The ideas and the processes are remarkable because they really open us, as we have done seldom before in documents of this kind, to the mystery of the sacred in our life, and called us to try and personally grapple with that as we progressively become transformed and grow. And the document is centred in relationship, which I think speaks to formation and its ultimate goal. And it says formation is holistic. It's not just about the head. It's not about how we feel, but it's also about what we might do and trying to make the connections in our life across those dimensions. So the question, well, what's moved you? Because moved by the Spirit is one of the core themes of the document. Talking to Wayne earlier, we were sharing how we came to our particular perspectives. His came to him this morning, and I had to confess mine came to me this morning in the early hours. It had been incubated, I must say, and when Mark first said to me, well, this is what we're asking you to do, it should be pretty straightforward, I thought, yeah, that's fine, I'll just let it kind of happen. And it took till this morning to happen, because when I look back, I thought, well, there's a lot of things that move us, but what deeply has touched me, and why has it touched me? So what's moved my spirit? And I think it took me a while, because Wayne Dyer says, when you look, you are always called to look inwardly, but seldom do we do that. We typically look outwards first, and we make observations about others rather than ourselves. So this was an inward look, a look at the interiority. And as I did, it brings into question one's awareness of self. And to quote Teilhard, it's pretty shaky for most of us to do this task. So what's moved me? I thought some 3 years ago, almost to the day, I had an experience that has stayed with me that I had never had before. And for those, some of you might know, I have a daughter who's had a fairly traumatic life. And my wife and I were in the hospital 3 years ago awaiting her first delivery. And it was a very anxious wait because we weren't sure how that might go. In fact, whether things would be okay, given the complications. So there we sat and we prayed and we quietly, wondered. And probably about 45 minutes after surgery, she was wheeled back, and alongside of her was her husband, and on her chest was this little infant. And I think for the first time in my life, I experienced or re-experienced the depth of love that I'd not known before, and a depth of connection to this infant and them. And I wondered why. Why is this so? What's happening to me? And my reflection was that if this love that I experienced through this is a small inkling of the love that God has for me and others, then I do not need to be afraid. So what's moved me was a deeply relational inner awareness that there's something special, and at times that calls us into relationship and reveals itself in a way that says, you'll be okay.
Thank you, Bill. Could I just invite you now, just a little bit of space for people just to maybe share with the person next to them if you're comfortable. Maybe it's just a saying of hello if you haven't had the opportunity to, but just a minute to maybe connect in with something that spoke to you in Bill's sharing, or even something as well that connects to the framework that you're happy to have a conversation around. So just a minute before we hear from our next speaker. You're not allowed to leave. Okay. I'd now like to invite to the stage Dr. Wayne Tinsey, Executive Director of Edmund Rice Education Australia, who's going to share his personal reflections inspired by our dynamic of Alive in Relationship.
Thank you, Luke, and just like to pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians of this wonderful place in which we find ourselves, and pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and future. Thank you for the wonderful privilege of being able to share a few ideas. I'll try to make it brief. I have a confession to make, though, before I start. This morning I was revising our new formation framework in the corridor of my office, and I was preparing for this reflection when I felt the need to go to the toilet. Now, our toilet at National Office is one of those eco-friendly ones where the light functions on movement, no pun intended. Now, I need to confess to you that I took my copy of our terrific new document with me, as my time was quite limited, and I continued my preparation while seated comfortably. After a minute or two, as is supposed to, the light went out. I realised that my best way of turning the light on and continuing my important task was to stand up and move my arms around, and it worked. So what has this got to do with formation? I would suggest that our growth into a deeper sense of what the mystery that we call God calls us to be requires us from time to time to stand up and to re-enter our relationship with God so that we can see things with fresh eyes. We sometimes have to move from our comfortable positions in order for the light to shine on this new call that springs forth every time we encounter that mystery. I think our formation framework teaches us that God is not a mystery to be mastered by study or theological investigation, but rather a mystery that we need to be mastered by. To me, the latter alludes to the deepest aspiration that we can hold for Christian formation. It is essential for metanoia, a conversion of heart towards the demands of our gospel, an ever-deepening reorientation of both individuals and our community towards a sense of people of Godness. I'll tell a little story, and my apologies to Brother Steve for my accent. Travelling once in India, our bus was sidelined and had a flat tyre, and we were asked to get off the bus and stand around, and of course we did so, and in places like India this immediately attracts a crowd, particularly people wanting to sell things, people wanting to do a little bit of business, a bit of commerce. And within very short time there was this industrious man who set up a little stall of religious icons, some beautiful things from all sorts of traditions, the rich religious tapestry of India. And I was very taken by a crucifix that this little man put out, obviously a Hindu man, this beautiful wooden crucifix, and I was very taken by it. And when he sensed my interest, I asked him, "Sir, could I have a closer look at the crucifix?" And he said to me very clearly, "Oh no, sir, do not worry about that one. I have a much nicer one over there. It has a little man on it." And of course, to that Hindu man, the little man on the cross or off the cross probably didn't make a whole lot of difference. But our relationship with that little man provides the whole template for how we in turn relate to the whole of creation. In his note, in the first part of our formation document, Philip Pinto urges us to recover our relationship with the humanity of Jesus. For me, it is this relationship that will inspire our church and our whole Edmund Rice family towards greater authenticity in mission. It is this human Jesus, this little man on the cross, who taught us that service and compassionate engagement with our world and in our relationships are indispensable to the way that we worship a loving and expansive God. It is this human Jesus, this little man on the cross, who showed us that we are most fully alive as human beings when we are in solidarity with the poor and those in this world who are excluded.
Thank you, Wayne. And again, just an opportunity for you to have a minute of engagement with those around you. You don't need to share about the moments when you were required to move about, but whatever you feel calls you to respond, just a minute to have a conversation with somebody around you. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our third dynamic is an invitation to be open to the call to liberation. In many ways, it's the fruit of our mission. And in asking Mr. Tim Cronin to come forward, I didn't have the opportunity personally to speak with Tim, but I've heard that he's going to share his story around his experience in leading groups on immersions, in working food vans, etc. So he'll bring a personal reflection to what we're inspired to live into in relation to this movement of being called to liberation. Thanks, Tim.
I'd like to thank you guys for asking me to come and speak here this afternoon. When I got a call from Peter Hay asking me to share my reflection on liberation, the first thing that came to mind was the Edmund Rice Centre Amberley food van, which I've been involved in for the last 2.5 years. And I was definitely more than happy to be able to share one of my experiences from the food van. It's an experience that I think embodies the values of Edmund Rice. But to start off, before I can sort of speak about exactly how the food van can contribute to the liberation of people, I think it's important to first consider the status of homelessness in our society. So homelessness is one of the most diverse, complex and debilitating social issues that are facing our society today. For people that are experiencing homelessness, their pathways into that situation are never alike. It's a complex mix of personal, social, family, psychological, physical, emotional and mental issues. These issues are compounded by structural and systemic issues that only serve to perpetuate their situation. Something I believe is the most devastating aspect of homelessness is social isolation. People experiencing homelessness are perceived by the public to be dirty, undeserving, lazy, aggressive and criminal, which serves to push them to the furthest margins of our society. And I think the most dangerous perception of all is that homeless people actually want to be homeless. This absolves all society of any responsibility to respond to this social problem. And homelessness is a bit of a paradox that it exists in the peripheries of the public and political agenda, yet most people would see it almost every day on the streets that we walk down. So what is perpetuated is a message that society has rejected people experiencing homelessness, and so in turn these people have rejected society. These are the real forgotten souls of our community. When we consider this enormous problem, it's hard to imagine how the Edmund Rice Centre Amberley food van can contribute to liberation of people that are experiencing homelessness. I think what sums up what our contribution is it comes in the form of a quote I heard the other day, which is, "I might not be able to stop the downpour, but I'll happily go for a walk with you in the rain." Essentially, at Edmund Rice, we don't really have the capacity to provide housing, to provide counselling or financial assistance, any form of medical treatment, any form of drug rehabilitation. While we do provide a little bit of an answer to food insecurity, our most important aspect of our program is the social interaction that we provide. What we aim to do at the food van is move away from traditional transactional based operations of soup vans and move on to ones based around community engagement and inclusion. The primary service we offer is to meet people on the margins of society, to remind them that all of society has not rejected them, and to share a coffee or a hot dog with them and have a chat about their day. I'd like to share a story about a man who's recently started coming down to the van in the last few months. His name is Dave, and he was once in a relationship where he had a child, a house and a stable job. However, his partner developed over the years a drug addiction. With this drug addiction, his circumstances began to change. As it got worse, the family broke down, his child was removed as his partner was no longer seen as fit to care for him. he lost his job and his house in the process. He had no financial capital as it had all been spent on his partner's drug addiction. So here was Dave living in the Gatwick, which, for those of you that don't know, is a rooming house in St Kilda, notorious for violence, poverty, drug and alcohol abuse, and also incarceration. His partner still regularly visited the Gatwick, and he saw her on regular occasions as she sourced her drugs from there. When I first met Dave, he hadn't seen his son for 8 months. He was withdrawn, he was often sad, and he rarely engaged with anybody. Over the time, I struck up a bit of a relationship with Dave. Despite being fit to care for his son, the Gatwick was seen as an unsuitable place to raise a child. And given that he was stuck at the bottom of waiting lists for community and public housing, which are 34,000 people long in Australia, Dave had no choice but to utilise the private rooming house system. In order to be able to get his son, he needs to have what they call a proper house, which is sourced from the private rental market. However, he can't get a house there until he gets a job. But the problem is he can't get a job because no one will employ him because he doesn't have a house. When I asked Dave why he doesn't move out of the Gatwick, he told me that if he was to do that, he would have to move into the far outer suburbs where he'd feel isolated and cut off to the world. He said that as long as he keeps his head down and keeps to himself, he'll be safe at the Gatwick. Because it was here at the Gatwick, when the food van arrives, that allows him to feel like he's alive. Dave told me that it's the only time that he now experiences that he exists in the world. For Dave, having the chance to be part of the food van community, to have a chat and a sandwich, is all that he needs for him to remember that he hasn't been forgotten in society. Even if it's just for an hour and a half a night. Whilst the food van can't give Dave a house, we can't give him a job, we can't provide him drug treatment, we can't reunite him with his son, that 90 minutes a night that the food van is there, we're able to contribute to liberation of Dave. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Again, invite you just to have a conversation with somebody around you and something that stays with you or has stayed with you in relation to what Tim has powerfully shared. Okay, thank you. We've been privy to 3 personal reflections drawing from the wisdom of the dynamic of formation that we have named as being moved by the Spirit, alive in relationship and called to liberation. And I'd like to invite forward Brother Paul Oakley, President of Edmund Rice Education Australia, Brother Peter Clinch, the newly appointed Province Leader of the Oceania Province, to be joined by Adrian Sherry and Kate Bradley for the official launch of the formation framework.
We speak for all young people throughout Oceania and beyond who will come to encounter the work and the spirit of Edmund Rice communities in Oceania. On their behalf, we declare a yearning for joy and life, for freedom and truth, for passion, possibility and liberation, for inclusion, equality and justice, where right relationships with all life flows. May the words of this new formation framework inspire and shape encounters and opportunities that live on in our hearts forever.
We won't do a twosome, we'll speak separately. Thanks for those reflections, though. I suppose we're talking about a common understanding today, a truly joint approach to formation. And I'll begin by saying that the land on which we gather today is the spiritual and traditional land of the Wurundjeri people, one of the 5 tribes of the Kulin Nation, and I acknowledge their leaders and elders, past and present. These elders provided wisdom and guidance over the generations, although this provision was interrupted by European expansion through the land. Telling the story and making sense of reality has also been part of the Christian tradition. Today we celebrate the launch of a formation framework that, using the words of Philip Pinto, will provide us with the wisdom and inspiration to continue to enrich the lives of those we seek to serve in the name of Jesus and Edmund. For the past 7 years, though we have worked from independent but related formation frameworks, the Oceania province and its creation, Edmund Rice Education Australia, have cooperated to provide enriching experiences to those who are inspired by the story of Jesus and Edmund, or who wanted to delve deeper into their own story, or who wished to explore their relationship with the mystery of the divine whom we call God. The Oceania province and Edmund Rice Education Australia are now independently responsible for formation in their organisations and their networks. We've joined in partnership to develop the one formation framework, The Good Seed Will Grow. We each seek to provide a contemporary expression of the charism of Blessed Edmund in our ministries, and the formation program will provide the skills that we need to do that. It will be essential to our priority, as noted in the principles of formation, to build and sustain a mission-based focus in each Edmund Rice community. The Oceania leadership team, with Vince Duggan as leader, and members including Brother Dean McLaughlin, who's present today, and the Council of EREA, worked through Mark McLaughlin and Mark Walsh and then Luke Edwards, and indeed many others, to produce the framework that you have received today. On behalf of all of us, I welcome and congratulate on their appointment the new Oceania leadership team with Brother Peter Clinch as leader and the other members who are with us today as we launch this framework together. May our hearts and minds be transformed, and may the good seed grow in all of us.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. I feel that I'm between two worlds at the moment when I see the staff members of Parade College, Rachel and Kate and Dennis here, where I was chaplain until recently, and it was a delightful experience where the boys educated me and formed me. And then having Edmund Rice camps here in great number, because Edmund Rice camps I have a long association with, particularly here in Victoria. So I'm delighted that this formation framework will bring us together. And it's been a long journey to come together. So I also acknowledge our Indigenous peoples, and I particularly like to name Vicky Clark Walker, who is here, and Vicky has been a great friend of us in this region and from the Aboriginal Catholic ministry. It's great to have you here again, Vicky. And I look around this room and I have a bit of awe because there's some great formators in this place, and a couple have formed me. And there was one particular, she won't mind, I know, because she embarrassed me a couple of times. And she gave me an essay topic once to write. And I can still remember the topic. And 2,000 words had followed. And it was very much about formation. To change is to grow. To grow is to mature. To mature is to create oneself endlessly. And 2,000 words later, and I got a credit for it. Mary Ann Comfoy, thank you. So we have various peoples in this room who have formed me, and no doubt others could stand here and do so. But we come with this framework of formation, and it's based on the agenda of our world, and that's God's agenda. The world is our starting point for a quest for the mystery we call God. And I dearly hope the people that engage in the formation programs that come from this framework will do that. But today we can no longer pretend that all is well. The signs of death and decay are around us. We don't have to watch far from the television to see Syria, Egypt, plain disasters, the 152 asylum seekers kept captive on the sea for weeks. And yet this formation framework is to find hope and to be agents for change. So please, I hope the people that engage in these formation frameworks will be people of hope who are agents of change. Our way of life is no longer a revolution against the dominant culture. Many of our people and institutions have become domesticated, and that's including our Catholic Church, by the comfort and affluence of the society around us. The gospel of Jesus does challenge us, and the gospel of Jesus is only good news when seen through the eyes of the poor, when the poor trust us enough to befriend us. We know we are standing on holy ground. And how did I hear that with your story, Tim, of your man that you met at the soup van? So may any formation in the name of Edmund Rice experience lead us to the sacred ground that we call to engage with those who are made poor. It is in relationship with those made poor that we find our God. So may all Edmund Rice people find voice, those voices we heard earlier in this liturgy, and advocate by word and action for all suffering, marginalised life of our planet. It is a crucial time, it's a tipping time. We have got no room or time to turn back. And I was taken by the sales of the document and the word that you spoke about again, Tim, of liberation. We are called to be free agents for change. We are called for liberation. We are called a freedom to love and to be in relationship with others. Edmund, our inspiration in his life, experienced the intimacy of love and of pain when he was husband and father and later brother. May we never be afraid to love. And may we be drawn by others into that loving embrace, particularly by those who struggle and who are on the edge. So I'm happy to endorse the framework of formation, and it is a great joy for me in my heart that it is a joint project between Edmund Rice Education and the Oceania province. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Paul. Thank you, Brother Peter, and to Kate and to Adrian. I'd now like to, as we move to closing prayer, invite three of our identity leaders to come forward and offer some reflection in relation to our formation framework.
May we be moved by the Spirit that breathes life into all that we do. May we be inspired to live creatively with life's questions in a spirit of openness and discovery. Live Jesus in our hearts forever.
May we be alive in relationship, in solidarity with all on life on earth. May we boldly form meaning from the diverse stories and the realities in our communities and in the world, and in doing so, be changed in how we see the world, opening us up to a deeper level of relationship with God and with neighbour. Live Jesus in our hearts. Amen.
Call us to liberation as agents of transformation in our world. May we speak with authority as a prophetic voice in the church and in the world. May our presence reflect a respect and dignity of all worldviews and cultures as we collectively seek an experience of mutual transformation. Live Jesus in our hearts forever.
And before we move into some drinks and nibbles, We're going to join in voice. Those of you who have in front of you this sheet of paper, down the very bottom, there are 4 lines which are part of, I suppose, a refrain. And gee, it would be good if people picked up the tune and were able to sing it out. So we'll see how we go. But this will close our launch and allow us to continue our conversation. This good seed will grow. Abundant grace unfold. Find deep rest in our hearts. Our sacred story flows. A sacred moment grows. Receive your holy word. Await your deep embrace, aspiring love and faith. Moved by the Spirit, breathing life into all that you do. We dare a world created for love and life and grace and renew. Of the good that will shine through, we will be golden lights, revealing revelation true. This seed will grow, let it unravel, let it grow. Free in our hearts. On and on and on it goes. This seed will grow, let it unravel, let it go. Free in our hearts, freedom souls. On and on it goes. Will grow, let it unravel, let it go. Freeing our hearts, freedom souls. On and on it goes. So thank you for making the effort to be here. So the drinks and nibbles are available until 6 and they'll be cut off. So yeah, please enjoy each other's company and look forward to having a conversation with you all. Thank you.